I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council members Gearbaugh, Seibel Koenig, Rhodes, Roth, Tahar, and Dillon. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Deputy Clerk Bloom, City Treasurer Bennett, Police Chief Rennick, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, DPW Director Fordyce, and City Attorney Smith. The rest of you in the audience this evening, we welcome you, and we'd appreciate it if you'd sign up in the back to my left. At this time, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as distributed unless there are amendments.
So moved.
As submitted, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we will dispense with that. So we come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? No citizen comments, then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to public hearings. Item 15-138. This is Tax Increment Financing Authority Amendment. The first motion will be a motion to open the public hearing at 7:39 p.m.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The public hearing is now open. We now afford the public an opportunity to speak if they wish to on this agenda item.
Move to close.
Move to close by Mr. Gearbaugh at 7:40. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded again by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Public hearing is now closed. The final motion will be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution 2015-2, a resolution to approve the 2015 restated development plan and tax increment financing plan proposed by the Tax Increment Finance Authority of the City of Saline and to provide for the collection of tax increment revenues. Excuse me.
Move to approve and adopt.
Thank you, Councilmember Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Dillon. Any discussion? And of course, I would welcome some from Councilmember Gearbaugh, who served on the task force, which was the impetus for these changes. Sorry to put you on the spot, my friend.
That's okay. As we've discussed as prior meetings, the idea of this is to try and expand our TIFA authority and so forth in terms of what they're able to do in the future and try and capture all the ideas. There's things that are changing, technology, other aspects, but we also have to tie kind of a dollar amount to it so that we meet the requirements of the state in order to continue what we currently have and can use. The intent is that our hope is that in the next 30 years, whatever comes before us, or before the TIFA board can be built into our project as we try to improve our economic development within the city, or as we try to improve basically the aspects that drive people to come to Saline, which we have done in the past, either through our parks, through economic development, through some of the other aspects that we have done in terms of road improvements, sewer improvements, industrial parks, some of those items. So the idea of this is, like anything else, you need to review it every few years, refresh it, and this is what we're required to do at this point in time.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any subsequent discussion? Well, let me just add, and I'll echo his statements. I was honored to work with our economic development boards to establish this task force, and I want to commend the individuals who served on that group. In particular, our bond counsel, who's not here this evening, Roger Sweat, who invested a lot of time and energy, and his insights and directions were invaluable. But as Mr. Gearbaugh indicated, these are good changes, good amendments that reflect future trends and opportunities, and I'm very enthusiastic about its adoption. So I urge my colleagues to vote in the affirmative. Is there anything further? No, then it's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Dillon to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to public hearing 15-139. This is special land use for 1200 Woodland Drive. The first motion will be a motion to open the public hearing at 7:43 PM.
Move to open?
Thank you, Councilwoman Seibel Koenig, seconded by Councilman Roth. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The public hearing is now open, affording anyone in the public an opportunity to speak on this issue. Is there a motion to close the public hearing at 7:44?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Roth, seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The public hearing is now closed. The final motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 29th, 2015 memo from Assistant Clerk DeHaan and to approve or not to approve the special land use for the property at 1200 Woodland Drive, Saline, to allow for use of indoor sports facility.
Move to acknowledge and approve?
Thank you, Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Any discussion on this? Mr. Gearbaugh, please.
I think we just should have a little idea of what the business is that's proposing this, if Mr. Campbell or whoever would speak to it.
Absolutely. I believe this was discussed at a previous planning commission meeting, but Mr. Rubel, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, Mr. Todd Tracy is here. Mr. Todd Tracy is here. He's the owner of the property and proprietor, and he can explain what type of sports uses would be there.
We welcome you here this evening. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. So I actually don't own the property yet. We're in due diligence. Hopefully we'll close on it in August if all goes well. Our plan is to open up a sports facility there primarily aimed at youth. There's a large need for youth training and indoor sports, basketball, volleyball, indoor soccer, field hockey, those types of things. We have a lessee lined up who's presently operating out of Ann Arbor, who's eager to get in that space. So that's sort of our plan for it.
Very good. Mr. Rubel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, we pretty much covered it at the Planning Commission meeting. They felt it was good use, and they were very thankful that 1200 Woodland Drive would actually, find a new user, finally be put to good use. It's been vacant since it was built in 2005.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions for our guest or for our city superintendent? Mr. Rhodes, please.
Not so much a question. Well, actually, I do have one question. What level of skill will this facility be open for kids to use? For beginners or?
I'm sorry?
Is it for beginners or people who are
For
more skilled?
all levels.
All levels.
And we really believe in the lessee, the tenant that's coming in really believes that there's a spot for all kids. You can play the top level, elite level, or you can be beginners. And we'll offer lessons, camps, all sorts of services.
Good. And I'm very pleased to see another opportunity for energetic activity amongst our young people. We, as most communities, continue to struggle with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Ms. Seibel Koenig?
I just want to say I'm looking forward to it. As the mother of a former lacrosse player who hauled her kid out to Wixom for indoor sports for years, having something local is long overdue. I think it'll be a good success.
We think so, too. Thank you.
Anything further? Gentlemen, thank you. Any subsequent discussion? No, then it's been properly moved. Let me get to that page here. Excuse me. Properly moved by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig, seconded by Councilwoman Dillon to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business 15-140. This is Eagle Scout Project Emerson Pfeiffer. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 14th, 2015 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not to approve Emerson Pfeiffer's Eagle Scout project of installing a bench at the Saline Rec Center. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge, and I'll do that right now for acknowledge.
Start with acknowledging receipt. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Dillon. We have a guest here. We appreciate you being here, young man, and our Parks and Rec Director. I'll turn it over to both of you. Do we have a PowerPoint, or is it just?
We're going to do an overhead.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully we have
Right.
this lined up.
Well, as soon as the screen is down, you may begin.
I'd just like to first introduce Emerson. I've been working with Emerson for probably 6 months or maybe even longer, working on his project. I'm going to let him do the whole presentation and explain what he's doing, but it has gone before the Park Commission and approved, and then obviously now we're coming to City Council. Okay.
All right. So all of you, if you have the handout that Carly gave you out, my name is Emerson Pfeiffer. I am a Life Scout in Troop 457, looking to do my Eagle Scout project to obtain my Eagle rank. If you would flip to page 2, I can just read this off. My project is to put a bench outside the Saline Rec Center at the end of the car loop. Currently, there's nowhere to sit outside the front of the building by the car loop where people get picked up, and putting a bench there would fix this issue. The bench I'm going to be putting in is made of Trek boards, which are made out of a recycled material. It's going to be maintenance-free, and they're warranted for 25 years. If you'd flip to page 3, you can see of the exact location I'm going to be putting the bench in, where that orange little banner is. Pages 3 and 4 show the location. 4 has a couple of close-ups. I'm going to be digging out the dirt here in this kind of trapezoid-shaped area. I'll be digging out the dirt, putting in gravel and cement, and grounding the bench there. And then if you look on page 5, that's just a list of what I'm going to be doing and a picture of the bench I'm going to be using, which is in-grounded. I know in the picture it's not in-grounded, but when I order it offline, there's a version I can get that's in-grounded. Just a couple reasons on the last page I have for putting in the bench would be it's a safe place for kids and adults to sit and wait and get picked up. It'll help pull cars through the car loop and reduce some congestion at the door. A lot of times people get caught there waiting to pick up their kids even though they're not technically supposed to, but this would help move them through. And it's also a visible and easy place for runners, just kind of running by if they need to sit down and relax. There isn't much out there, but that's all I have.
A little technical difficulties.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's open it up to questions. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you have a question?
No,
No, I'm sorry?
not at this point.
Questions? Nope, Mr. Rhodes, I'm sorry.
Yep, not a problem. I didn't have my hand up before. That's okay. Just wondering what the surface material is going to be around the bench. Is it going to be lawn, grass, gravel, cement?
Cement, concrete, yeah. We'll dig out the dirt, put in gravel, because when you put in cement, you won't want to have gravel underneath it. We'll put in some gravel and then have cement on top of that.
I was referring to the surface around the bench where you sit. That's going to be a big concrete pad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? No? Very good. Anything either of you would like to share? No? Good? Okay. Well, then we'll proceed to vote. The first motion, it's been divided, is to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated July 14, 2015, from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. That was moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. The second motion then would be a motion to approve and adopt, or to approve or not to approve, excuse me, Emerson Pfeiffer's Eagle Scout project of installing a bench at the Saline Rec Center.
Move to approve?
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Har. Any subsequent discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your initiative and your time this evening. Okay. Moving on to new business item 15-141. This is roadway assessment management plan adoption. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 15th, 2015 memo from DPW Director Fordyce and to approve and adopt or not to adopt the 2015 City of Saline Local Street Assessment Management Plan.
Move to acknowledge receipt and to approve
Thank you.
and adopt.
Mr. Har, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Mr. Fordyce, we would welcome you to the podium to go over your memo of July the 15th, and then we'll open it up to any questions that we have from the dais. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So this is essentially a formalization of a process that we've been following for many, many years. Back when Gary Roble became city superintendent engineer, he instituted some of these processes where we evaluate the roadways, their importance, their current condition, and attempt to maintain a particular level of pavement condition and roadway performance. That became a little bit more formalized with the availability of asset management software. I started working with a program called RoadSoft when I started with the city in 2001, computerizing the catalog that Gary had developed and doing annual and sometimes every other year assessment of pavement condition. And then within the RoadSoft program, it has deterioration projections, so you can estimate the remaining service life of each roadway, each segment, and project future maintenance and replacement budgets. Starting in 2006, 2007, the state of Michigan started passing legislation requiring municipalities and county road agencies to implement these policies that we had already had in place. And then they've continued to make it more and more stringent. So in the past, we were able to show them our capital improvement plan, submit our RoadSoft data, and they were satisfied that we were following the proper procedures. But this year, they informed us that we now needed a formal written asset management plan. So we hired Tetra Tech to consolidate our existing data. Myself and Gary and Joanne McDonough got together to provide the engineering and maintenance and financial information for the plan. And they put this together, ran a couple different projections. And then one of the goals of this was to keep this as close to what we already have on the books. So it very much follows our current CIP and makes that acceptable to the Transportation Asset Management Council. So we have the formal plan. It's been reviewed by TAMC. They have approved it. The next step is for council to approve it, and then we continue to implement it. I had a couple of highlights at the bottom there of my memo that the basic plan here uses our existing CIP funding level of $878,000. That will improve the average page or rating of both our major and local streets. And during discussions of this, we set a goal of an average PASER rating of 7, which is technically in the book, that's the line between fair and good, but in reality, it's really quite good. But to achieve that, it's projected we need nearly $2 million of annual funding to hit that mark.
Well, on that note, let's open it up to questions from the dais. Thank you for that report and analysis, Mr. Fordyce. Any questions for our DPW director? Ms. Tahar, please.
Yes, thank you. So this is a 5-year plan. Is it required that it be updated and redone every year? Is it like a moving window? What are the requirements down the road?
My understanding at this point is that we have to do it every 5 years. We have to have so our reporting, let me back up a little bit. The actual requirement is a 3-year plan, but we did a 5-year plan because that's what our CIP is. Within the annual reporting that I have to do, that requires a continually rolling 3-year projection. So those annual reports will be updated as our CIP is updated and as we do actual construction. The written report will have to be updated every 5 years. Or ours will be every 5 years because we did a 5-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Ms. Tahar?
Maybe later, not at the moment. Thank you.
Mr. Gearbaugh, please.
On page 5, to discuss about future anticipated funding amounts and so forth, and you mentioned about the drop in revenue in FY17 as a result of hopefully MDOT having finished up US 12. How is 18 and 19 determined? Are those anticipated potential grants or something we're looking at, or, because these definitely aren't revenue that we're
Right, and that's,
expecting?
right, well, so that's what our CIP is. Those are the projects that are in the capital improvement plan, and the funding sources for beyond 17 have not been identified.
So these are really future funding expenses that we anticipate, but not necessarily the funding that we have in the pipeline yet.
There is no funding in the pipeline for those currently,
I
yes.
want to make sure. So that's what we need to worry about at this point.
Right.
Thank you.
And the $2 million to get to Phaser of 7.
Seven.
Any additional questions? No? Mr. Fordyce, thank you. Appreciate your time. Any subsequent discussion? Mr. Gearbox, please.
I just think this clearly, like everything else in the state, points out where we stand in the terms of trying to fund our roads and repair. We need to figure out how we're going to handle this, and if the money's not coming from the state, or we hope that it's going to, we're going to have to look at our own resources and what we're going to have to do within the city itself. And potentially, we have money coming in from the county, but it really is, our focus on this is, I think, a great way to start with this, but it really is determining what we're going to do in the future.
And let me just echo that you're indeed correct, that this year we are getting funding from the county because they triggered a statute from the beginning of the last century, this past fall. And there are conversations and continued discussions amongst county leaders and community stakeholders to do something at the county-wide level to assist a number of municipalities, including the road commission, with their infrastructure needs. So hopefully I'll be able to report something more tangible on that front in the coming months. Anything further? Ms. Tahar.
Yes, I would just comment. I started out reading the report a little bit resentfully because I inferred, I think correctly from the cover memo, that we were kind of forced to do this. But as I went along, I think, for me at least, is very valuable to have the information put together in this way and presented in this way. Obviously, we have been discussing when we talk about the CIP and when we have our budget discussions, it's clear we have many more road repair costs than we have money coming in. But having it presented in this way was very valuable and useful for me. So I think it was worthwhile.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Tahar. Anything further? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Dylan, or excuse me, it was seconded by Dylan, moved by Tahar to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Before I read the motion for new business item 15-142, I want to acknowledge a few things in the memo dated Tuesday, July the 14th. By accident, we included two resolutions in support of the millage renewal. There's the one on the left, which was the initial resolution, and then the one on the right that I revised. I'm asking you to consider the adoption of the one on the right, the one I would revise, noting the fact that we are missing a second E in the fifth whereas. Just want to make that clear. I apologize that both were put in your packet by mistake. So the motion is new business item 15-142, PSAP agreement. The motion is motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 14th, 2015 memo from Police Chief Rennick and to approve and adopt or not to adopt the resolution in support of the communication millage renewal. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge and approve and adopt.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. Chief Rennick, do you care to comment? And we also have our former Deputy Police Chief and Mr. Sear, is it director of the 800 megahertz consortium? What's your co-manager? Okay, very good. Well, we appreciate your time this evening. And gentlemen, I would turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. The memo in itself is relatively self-explanatory, but there's a lot of technical stuff in here. And since I was not here at the time that this was originally implemented back in 2006, I asked former Deputy Chief Jack Seo if he would explain it, because he has just a great working knowledge of this, and I believe that he will be able to answer any questions that you might have in regards to the millage.
Jack, the floor is yours. Dangerous words.
Well, I understand that you all have a copy of our business plan as part of your packet. And if you note on the last page of the verbiage on the business plan itself, I think there are 2, 4, 6, 8 items that are listed there as goals for us to finance during the coming 10-year period. Those are the items that we foresee as being on the horizon for the countywide radio system. First of all, let me explain. This is a countywide radio system for public safety owned by Washtenaw County. All of the radios, the portables, mobiles, the control stations that are on the desk, the consoles that are on the desks, and the public safety answering points, the dispatch centers, they're all owned by Washtenaw County. And they're furnished to all of the jurisdictions for a nominal charge of $50 per microphone per year. We, as a consortium, we assume the responsibility of providing for all the maintenance, for not only the radios, but for the 7 tower sites around the county that service those as well. So we pay a regular maintenance fee to Motorola of about $11,414 a month. We pay a twice annual fee to the Michigan Public Safety Communications System, the MPSCS, which entails all of public safety in the state of Michigan, of which we are a subset. So one of our Saline police officers can go anywhere in the state of Michigan and talk on the radio system, talk back here, or talk to anybody else who is also on the MPSCS. We pay them about $125,000 every 6 months to maintain the 7 tower sites. We know that the radios that are now in our possession throughout the county are becoming outdated. They're all like a little individual computer, if you will. That's part of what I do on a daily basis, is I program those computers and try to keep up with the needs of the various departments that are using them. So we know that they're going to be outdated here in the next couple of years, and we have to replace the entire 2,330 or thereabouts of the radios that are in use right now in Washtenaw County. We're also going to try and provide a new emergency radio for all of the school buildings in the county, to include all the schools in the city of Saline and the Saline School District. I've got to remind myself if I'm missing anything here. That's basic. Oh, and the other thing is, the big item, at a price tag right now of estimated about $10 million, is replacing what's going to be called the next-gen 911 telephone switch, the enhanced telephone communications. So when you pick up the telephone and dial 911, it rings right into the police department if you need help. The federal government is now calling for all public safety answering points, like the dispatch center we have here, to be able to receive internet protocol-based streaming video, text messaging, the telemetrics that come in from things like OnStar, the in-vehicle systems that now operate and tell people when there's been an accident, what the severity is and what the speed was and what the attitude of the vehicle is and how many people were belted in and so on. All that information has to be capable to be communicated over the 911 system. And as you may imagine, the cost of that equipment is very expensive. So what we intend to do, in addition to the radio system itself, is provide that 911 distributed phone switch through some vendor, we haven't yet decided who, in the cloud, so to speak. So in other words, we won't have any physical equipment. We'll rely on the vendor to provide us with the service, and they will come in here and install the telephone equipment, and it will, all the messaging will go off into the cloud, and they will be responsible for maintaining and operating that large system for the entire county. So I guess that's what it's all about. That's where we're coming from. And I need to tell you, you would be the first jurisdiction that would pass formal endorsement of this millage if you choose to do so. And I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have.
Actually, before I open up for questions, Chief, do you have anything that you'd like to add? That was very thorough. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
You're welcome. This is why police always bring backup.
Any questions for Mr. Steele or for Chief Rennick? Mr. Rhodes, please.
Jack, you had mentioned that one of your officers could report back in here from any location in the state that was on the same system?
Correct.
Paraphrasing a bit there. Are the counties surrounding Washtenaw County on the same system?
Right now, portions of Wayne County are. Livingston County is in its entirety. Monroe County is. Lenawee County is considering coming on the system. And I don't know how many counties throughout the state. There's a preponderance, a large majority of the counties in the state are on the system. Even though a county is in itself not on the system, there's still the statewide system, so that regardless of where an officer was in the state, they could talk back here.
Okay, good, thank you. And sort of a perhaps unrelated question, but when we call 911 from our cell phones, does it still go up to Ann Arbor and bounce back here?
Depends on where you are. It'll reach the public safety answering point that's responsible for the cell tower that you are hitting at that point in time.
So it could be something other than the city of Ann Arbor?
Could be. It could be. And if you needed help back here, somehow, they could do all the magical electronic switching and route you to where you needed to be.
Yeah, a few times I've used that service, I've just asked to be connected to Saline.
Right, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Mayor Pro Tem?
No.
No? Okay. Mr. Gearba, did you have a question?
Just wondering, of course, for us, it generates approximately $81,000 that you said in terms of millage. So that covers the cost of paying for the new radios and so forth. Where and how do we use, and this may be a question for the chief, the rest of those funds of the $81,000 that remains? That's to support the dispatch?
The 470,000 that's listed in the memo?
Yeah, approximately that, yep.
Yes, that's going to be all the monies that will come from the actual millage. And that will, the radio, the switch that he was talking about, those are costs that we absolutely couldn't afford individually. So what happens is we join forces with everybody else in the county and are able to just do a part of that and of course reap the benefits of the whole switch, because there's no way we could have ever afford a $10 million switch.
Right, so we're basically reimbursing out of that $800,000 that we'll receive over 10 years, or almost $900,000, that 470 is what you're saying?
That would be the minimum. And plus there's ongoing maintenance costs. As an example, within this last year, we had a lot of problems with our dispatch center. All that was paid for by the PSAP consortium.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, that would have been very expensive otherwise.
Thanks, Mr. Gearba. Oh, please. Yep.
Excuse me. One other thing I was going to bring to your attention, everybody, we maintain a certain reserve too, so that, for instance, Eastern Michigan University just expanded by 10 police officers, given the difficulty that they were facing trying to help solve some of the crimes that were occurring in their area. So we provided them with 10 new portable radios and several new mobile radios for the police cars. Now, if this area over here, west and south of town, takes off, like there was some talk of a number of years ago, and now Saline Police Department decided to expand your dispatch operation, you could certainly call on us and expect that the county would probably provide, if we still had the funds available, the radios that would support that. So it's an ongoing assessment too of what the needs are and what's required.
Additional questions?
I think the only other thing I'd like to add is if for some reason this millage does not go through, all those expenses will be borne by the individual dispatch centers, which that 530 would probably be a pretty good estimate of what it's going to cost Saline.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
If there are no additional questions, let's transition to discussion. Any discussion on this motion? Well, let me begin by saying that when this proposal was passed countywide in 2006, it proved extremely beneficial for all of the county residents by enhancing our public safety officials' ability to communicate and communicate effectively. And I should note, and many in this community are aware of this, and many are very proud of this, that that countywide vote probably would not have transpired without the leadership and support and guidance of then Deputy Chief CO and Police Chief Paul Button, then Police Chief Paul Button. So we're indebted to those gentlemen for their leadership and for their efforts. As the memo outlines, and as Mr. CO has said tonight, and his comments, of course, were echoed by Chief Rennick, This is critically important, and I should remind all those who told us last year that they value and support our independent autonomous dispatch center. If you were genuine about that, you will support this proposal because it allows us to invest and invest critically in the type of equipment that we need to maintain that dispatch center we have here at City Hall. So gentlemen, I appreciate your time and your effort, and Mr. CEO, assuming that this vote passes tonight and passes unanimously, I'm very proud that we led on this issue and that we're the first community to endorse the 800 megahertz renewal. Is there anything further? No, that's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes, seconded by Councilwoman Tahar to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
We move on to our last new business item of the evening, 15-143. This is Metro Act Public Telecommunications. This will be a motion to acknowledge the July 14th, 2015 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the Metro Act permit application upon review and approval by the City Attorney. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge receipt?
Just to acknowledge receipt, Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
That.
Seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Campbell, I'll turn it over to you to go over your memo of July the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I say in my memo, city staff worked with the city attorney's office to review this. This is McLeod USA Telecommunications Service, LLC, and they've provided the telecommunications, easy for me to say apparently, to Saline Public Schools since 2000, and under the Metro Act permit application, or I'm sorry, the Metro Act permit that they were given, they're coming before to renew a 5-year permit to allow their technology to be in the city's rights of way. And as you can see in my memo, with the Metro Act, and except for 4 exceptions, there really is no method to deny permit or permit renewal. And so, just briefly, the 4 areas are: the applicant requests a permit in a form other than a standard form prepared by the MPSC, which of course is the Michigan Public Service Commission, which they did the proper form. Application does not include adequate proof that the insurance requirements are satisfied. Work through the attorney's office to clarify that and confirm that, which they do. Applicant has a history of failing to comply with terms of previous Metro Act permits. They're fine. Requested access will interfere with municipal facilities or activities in the right of way, which they do not. And again, they've been there, they continue to be there, and this is for lack of a better terminology, a formality that they submit, pay a fee, and move forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I may.
Any questions for City Manager Campbell? Mr. Hart.
Is this an entity that provides us then on an ongoing basis with Metro Act funds as well?
I guess I would defer that question. I don't know what, as far as if they pay into the fund or not.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing further, Mr. Hart?
No, thank you.
No. Mr. Rhodes, please.
Question for City Manager: if it were not for those 4 issues, would this be a firm that we would want to renew with anyway?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we don't have any. We've not received any, bad reports. We've not had any issues with them from an operations standpoint. So we would recommend moving forward and approving it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just clarification, it says, have been providing services to public schools in Saline. What do they provide for us as a city? The connection with that, or?
No, that's separate from us.
Okay. So is there any way we could benefit from this in terms of our own usage of this
Well, I
network?
believe, I'm not positive, but I believe this is possibly through the ISD, and we've checked into that in the past, and they've said no.
Funny that we have these running through the city, yet we
Yes.
don't have any ability to access any of this.
Any additional questions? Any subsequent discussion then on Ms. Tahar's, the motion that Ms. Tahar moved, Mr. Gearboss seconded to acknowledge receipt? No, then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. This time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve or not to approve the Metro Act permit application upon review and approval by the city attorney.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Roth. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Any discussion? No? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to discussion items. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Mr. Rhodes.
The Environmental Commission met last week, and we continue to work on refining the event that's going to take place at Summerfest down at Any Field for the children. And then I also wanted to remind everyone about the County Cleanup Day, which will be on September the 19th at our DPW facility. And that is a time period when anyone who lives within the county can bring even hazardous material too. So paints, oils, tires, steel, wood, whatever. It's a great service, and the Environmental Commission is pleased to help sponsor that along with the county.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Any additional committee, commission, or task force reports from council members? Ms. Tahar.
Yes, the Arts and Culture Committee is currently working in cooperation with the Parks and Rec Department to put together an application to the Detroit Institute of Arts to have art installations from the DIA in Saline in 2016. So we'll keep you updated on that.
Very cool. Great initiative. Thank the commission for their work on that. It's a great opportunity. Additional committee, commissioner, task force reports? No? Then how about reports or other announcements? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple of things. I want to let everyone know that the Saline Area Historical Society had a successful July 4th event. Approximately 200 people were there, and they're looking forward to doing it again next year in connection with the 150th sesquicentennial. The other thing, there will be the garage sale on August 7th and 8th, I believe it is, a Friday and Saturday, the first weekend of, along the same time as Summerfest is going to be occurring. So I encourage everyone to come out and see what's going on and hopefully buy a few pieces of items.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Additional reports or announcements? Ms. Tahar.
Yes, well, I noticed that council members received, I believe we all received an email from Saline Area Social Service about the paper products drive that they're going to be holding during Summerfest. And so I would mention that, and they're also, I noticed having a back-to-school shoes fundraising campaign. And I meant to bring a printout of those items that I made this afternoon, but I see that I left it at home. But there's more information about those two projects that they're working on right now, and one other project on the Saline Area Social Service website. So I encourage people to take a look at that. Several opportunities to help out here.
Very good. Thank you. Additional reports or announcements? I actually asked Mr. Campbell in advance of tonight's meeting to give an update related to comments that were made at the last meeting about our local Farcia plant and what abilities and responsibilities we have as a city. And perhaps Mr. Smith can comment on this as well. But since you all remember the comments and you should have received some well, I know you received some information. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Campbell at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did, in fact, talk to Ms. Meyer today, and as unfortunately as you all know, I had to miss that meeting. But I went through the information that she provided, and also watched the video from when she spoke at the July 6th meeting. One of the things that we talked about, I mean, again, being an advocate for some allegedly bad working area conditions and such. Some of you may or may not recall recent legislation that was passed referred to as the Death Star Bill, Public Act 4052, and certainly Mr. Smith can elaborate, but essentially precludes a local government from getting involved or following up with a private business. Right, wrong, or different, it's so within the last 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, is that correct, Mr. Smith?
Yes, it was signed by the governor on June 30th.
So it precludes us from getting involved for the most part.
And actually, if I may, and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you may have recalled, I don't know, Mr. Gearbaugh, if you sent this email to the entire group. Scott, the bill was a Pileski bill, if I'm not mistaken, initially in the House. And I believe, Mr. Gearbaugh, you communicated at least with me on the issue because the initial blueback would have invalidated a municipality's right to enact non-discrimination ordinances. That language was subsequently taken out of the final bill.
It expressly says that it doesn't invalidate non-discrimination ordinances, and also included another provision that allows a municipality in selling property or entering into another contract with a business to include in that contract terms that the business voluntarily offers.
But you were obviously concerned about a number of components of that legislation, those of which, many of those, are now part of state statute,
Right.
Regrettably, but some of your initial concerns were rectified, at least in the initial committee hearings.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the issue of taking away local government control, which has been basically a motivation of the entire Lansing legislature as it is right now, and unfortunately, that loses us with our voice that we can have to govern our own selves, which is a concern, and it should be a concern for everyone.
Anything further on this issue? Any questions for Mr. Campbell or Attorney Smith? No? Well, then let's proceed to our favorite topic, downtown parking. Chief Rennick provided you all with a memo dated July the 15th. This is in regards to his analysis and his recommendations pertaining to the creation of some additional long-term parking spaces in parking lots 4 and 2. And so with that, Chief, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Do each of you have a picture of the parking lots?
It came in your memo.
Okay. Then we won't need the screen then. What happened was after last meeting, I went to the 2 parking lots and looked at it from the standpoint of what is there that we can do on a temporary basis, knowing that council wants to have somebody of a professional nature, somebody who's very well versed in parking, and we can stop guessing about what we should or shouldn't do. Is there a way to temporarily do some reconfiguring of the parking lots until possibly the reconstruction of 12 is done with? And what I've come up with, as I show in the memo, is adding a total of 20 spaces, 7 in parking lot number 2, and 13 more in parking lot number 4. And if you take a look at the pictures of the parking lot, it just kind of makes, I guess it would make good sense to finish the row in parking lot number 2. Right now, there's 7 spaces that aren't all day, and it would just complete that row along the far east side of that parking lot. It would make those all day parking spots. And then if you
Chief,
take
real quick, if I can stop you, I'm sorry. And if I'm mistaken or being obtuse, my apologies. But I'm looking at your rendering, your map of lot 2. And mine seems to indicate that those last 2 are not going to be made long-term parking.
Right, because those are ones that are
those reserved by
those are
another-
reserved already, yes.
Right. Sorry to
But other than that, that's okay. The entire east end of that parking lot would all be all-day parking spots. In parking lot number 4, what we had done the last time is in between the dumpster and the front of the parking lot, which would be the north, those were moved to, for lack of a better term, over closer to the former city attorney's building and made those all-day parking spots. And if we continue and just wrap around, so that entire building has all-day parking spots, we will add, like I said, 20 all-day parking spots, which hopefully will solve a lot of this problem where employees need to park and they can't find the time to run in and out and move their cars. I did stop at the Salt Springs Brewery, talk to the owner, and they are working with other private businesses to see if they can find spaces other than public parking to park their employees. So hopefully that will not have a huge impact on our parking. I'm not certainly suggesting this as a permanent answer, but as a temporary until we can either get 12 reconstructed or we can get the parking expert to come in here and tell us exactly probably what we should do.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Questions about Chief's recommendations? How do people feel about this? Mr. Gearbaugh?
This is exactly what I kind of recommended. I think this will work. It's a compromise where we're granting more spaces, and I think this is a good solution. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Ms. Seibel Koenig, are you in agreement?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes?
It seems like a reasonable short-term fix.
Ms. Tahar?
Yes, and I also think, looking at it, it makes it somewhat more likely that a person will be able to figure out which area, the parking, the all-day parking areas seem to be grouped together in a lot more logical way than before. So I think it's an improvement in that regard.
Mr. Roth?
I'm in agreement with it. I'm almost ready to hire him as our consultant.
Okay. Ms. Dillon?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. So you will come back with the corresponding traffic control orders at our next council meeting on August the 10th?
Yes, I will.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is the community vision update. And actually at the dais this evening, you should have received, I don't know if you passed it out, Amy, or if City Manager Campbell did, our most recent community vision analysis. And hopefully you all got one. I don't see any heads nodding. So I guess at this time I'll turn it over to Mr. Campbell to give a brief update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and make this as brief as possible, as the mayor mentioned. Just a quick reminder, you may recall the plan for this, as is outlined in the beginning of the overview of this document, talks about having the city council review this plan at least once a month, so at least at one of the two regular business meetings, which we are obviously doing. And so the practice that staff has put into place at our weekly staff meetings is we go through and see if there's any updates to this plan each week. And so that's why you see the different colors. We will continue to do that, and then sometime in about November, probably most likely after the election, Mayor Marl and I had a brief discussion about this not too long ago, to have, again, as is outlined in the overview, another town hall type meeting to review the status and see if that's where, if that the continued direction is where folks want the city to go, and then if any changes or tweaks need to be done, we would do it at that point, and move on. So, real brief, goal one: maintain and grow a healthy center. So promote Saline's heritage. And again, focusing on the one-year tasks, the planning of the 150th anniversary, establish a task force, which the mayor has established. Treasurer Bennett is the city staff's main liaison, and that committee has met a couple times, working on a large traveling birthday card for people to write on, planning on having one big event in October of 2016. The sesquicentennial motto, established a motto of a sesquicentennial celebrating 150 years of community, progressively building on a rich culture of tradition as we bridge a future of innovation. So that is the official motto of the task force. Promote concept of Salt Springs Park development, submitted an application for a historic marker. You may recall that a couple months ago, through our Parks and Rec director, we submitted an application, and so we've gotten response back from the state, and so that approval process has started at the state level. And then continue to work on, I think it's probably going to be a winter project, but City Engineer Roble will work on laying out for the future development of the Salt Springs Park as we go to help go forward. Historic District Commission, working with on the scavenger hunt with Saline Main Street, and I know the folks that did it last year aren't able to do it this year, so I believe Main Street is still trying to work with to see if someone would take up that project and move forward. Updating also the walking map. City Clerk Royal is working on updating the walking map, the historical tour, and then also HDC is looking obviously for new folks, and we do for new members of the commission and people that have a technical background in historical homes and buildings, and then also potentially even residing in those districts. And so we have one, Mr. Ron Koenig, that is known throughout and known better by some members of this dais than others, but and then the next, so objective 2, perception, downtown area, support additional lighting. Of course, this was a part of the grant, the TAP grant that was awarded, so be working to have those installed as the project moves forward next year. Partner with Saline Area Schools, Saline Area Historical Society to improve connectivity between Henny Field and downtown and between Henny Field and Depot Museum. So we are currently working on developing a team of the stakeholders to sit down and start that process to see if ideas about how to make that connectivity, improve that, because I think at least what I've seen is certainly we have successful events downtown, we have successful events at Henny Field, but trying to put them together, for some reason they don't typically travel, people don't typically travel between the 2 points, so we're going to work on that. Objective 3, improve access to our downtown center of community, improve access city, update non-motorized plan, and that's in a few places throughout this document, and staff is working on that. Some of you may recall that in 2011 we adopted a new master plan, as well as at the same time we updated the Parks and Rec plan, and we also did a new non-motorized pathway plan, and so we were doing that again this year, working with Carlisle Wortman, our planning consultants, to do the 3 plans again together. And so staff is working with those folks and waiting for a kickoff, hopefully in the not too distant future, to move those projects forward, where we would have, of course, the charrettes, the public meetings to invite people in. Let's see. Investigate additional funding opportunities for non-motorized projects. That's status quo. We haven't identified anything new at this point. Work with MDOT to incorporate the paths, et cetera. So that's an ongoing process with MDOT as part of the project. And again, you may recall that MDOT has agreed to put in a pathway from Curtis Park along the cemetery and all the way up just to the west of Benny's, if you will. So that's a positive aspect of that. And then of course we may, if we end up redesigning that portion of Michigan Ave at right there where the lane drop right now, where it drops right there in front of Curtis Park, where we talked about doing that lane drop between Monroe and Mills, that would free up a portion of right-of-way for another pathway portion. If I miss one of these, please let me know. Increase density and diversity of downtown businesses and residences. Work with Michigan Ave Makeover Task Force and the other stakeholders to ensure changes support this objective of pedestrian friendliness. And of course, the task force has consolidated the teams with Saline Main Street, but staff is, of course, continuing to work with those to make sure that is a priority. Goal 2, community life development. Year 1 task, review and update non-motorized pathways, plan to promote connectivity, neighboring communities, again, working with Carla Wortman. Continue working with Michigan Department of Transportation, URS, and Saline Main Street. Again, we are continue to do that. The open house that MDOT has said that they're sometime probably in August that they will conduct. And also in addition to that, MDOT is also going to be presenting information to the Saline Chamber Board at their September meeting. Objective 3, arts, culture, community events, venue. Year 1 task, identify space for art venue after developing criteria. Arts and Culture Committee is planning distributing brochures, is my understanding, at Farmers Market and having an event at the upcoming Oktoberfest in September. And of course, as Mr. Harr mentioned about working with the Parks Commission for the DIA application. Goal 3, infrastructure. 1-year task, review status of the SAW grant application annually. Of course, we have submitted that and we're kind of waiting in line, and then hopefully we get that. We're hoping in either the second or third year of the process to be awarded that, we hope. And then Tetra Tech is currently working on a grant as requirement by NPDES, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit that we get for so we can discharge our wastewater, our clean wastewater. MDEQ has made a part of this project, part of these requirements for asset management, if you will, which is certainly part of the SAW grant. They're making us do part of it already. But the good news is whatever we do prior to is reimbursable through the SAW grant once we do in fact get it. But we are hoping not to have those upfront costs, but we're still hopeful that we will be awarded in the next year or two for the SAW grant. But we will continue to check on that to see where we're at. Sidewalk maintenance, as we talked about earlier at the work session, beginning the project to do all the grinding repairs throughout the city that will resolve approximately 90% of the problems. And then obviously we're going to begin working as of this evening. We'll work on moving forward with working on the other 10% as well. Objective 4, phase 1 of conceptual design for the development of Salt Springs Park. Again, that's, as I mentioned earlier, City Engineer's Office will be working on that layout. Non-motorized project plan, 1-year task, complete review and update. Again, same, working with Carla Wortman. Objective 6, planning utilities, urban development, the UDA, 1-year task, continue to explore feasibility and appropriateness of the Public 425 agreement with Saline Township. And of course, we have kind of a whole host of team members, also including the mayor and Councilmember Gierbach, who's helped out with some preliminary discussions, reviewing the proposed 425 language with the township. And then also currently staff is waiting for Tetra Tech to complete the utility studies that I suspect in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they'll have those accomplished, and we'll sit down and review a draft report and see what the results are. That would be for the proposed Saline Ventures residential development. Objective 7, public transportation. Continue to investigate possibility of developing expanded public transportation and multimodal options to residents. City Council with AATA, the ride, to discuss a possible service agreement. And those we've had, I know council's had multiple discussions on that, and as we proceed and go forward in the future. Objective 8, maintain city historic sites. The certified local government grant, we are waiting So even though you may recall, we did receive the grant to complete the condition assessment report for Rensselaer Farm in its entirety, we're waiting for the National Park Service to officially approve and sign the paperwork so we can move forward. And then once that happens, once that project is done, then we can go ahead and reapply for some grant dollars for the salvage barn. And you also may recall, at least the roof has been replaced on the salvage barn. But there is some other work that needs to be done. Finally, goal 4, finances, economic development, explore alternative transportation options to support downtown businesses during US 12 construction. That's ongoing. Working on scheduling, again, meeting with Saline Main Street to discuss the issue. Educate citizens regarding improvements to US 12. We are working with Main Street, and part of the communications team. We met, had kind of a kickoff meeting today, which consists of city staff and Main Street, but we're working on the plan as far as preliminary information going up before the project starts, when the project starts, and of course during the project, and how we're going to disseminate that information and such. So be a very busy time for sure. During US 12 construction, promote business development on east and west sides of Saline. We have a future meeting set up with the west side. The mayor has set that up, and so then also we'll be working with the chamber to try and come up with some possibilities as well. And I think hopefully I'm hoping that this will be very fruitful when we meet with the folks. I think it's in October. Is that correct, Mayor?
Or should actually, no. The larger business gathering we're planning for August. The luncheon that focuses on the needs of our businesses on the west end of town, we're aiming for September.
September, I'm sorry,
And then
okay.
our smaller business entrepreneurship forum will be in October,
Okay.
as it has been the last 2 years.
Yep, okay, very good, thank you for the clarification. The promote alternative access to downtown business during construction, again, ongoing effort with city, MDOT, Saline Main Street. Evaluate current services versus current staff, and that's, we continue to do that, and I've asked department heads to continually review those needs, and so on a quarterly basis, we'll see if there's any significant things. But that is, again, meant to be a little more brief than that, but I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions or any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. That was very thorough. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Rhodes?
The first item on the top of page 2, where we address the need to improve connectivity between Hennifield and other areas of town. I would like to suggest that a Friends of Hennifield representative be added to that team.
Great, good suggestion, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Great suggestion.
And then on that same page, under Community Life Development, Objective 1, connectivity, again, trails, bicycles, sidewalks. The second item says outside with neighboring groups. There's an effort that has recently begun and is gathering steam to move forward to make the Saline River navigable between the city of Saline and the city of Milan, and then after that to move on down to Monroe. And the same entities that are involved with that discussion have expressed an interest to also explore a non-motorized pathway between the two communities, Saline and Milan. And so there's a meeting coming up soon on that, and then I'll be bringing some more information back to the city to see how our involvement fits in.
Okay, if you have the date and time, you could pass that along, and maybe we could have a staff person
Yeah,
go.
the next meeting is the Saline River Greenway Alliance.
Okay.
That's the group that's going to be involved with the river portion of the river pathway, as I
Sure.
call it. And they're meeting next Thursday at 11 a.m. at Washtenaw County Parks. And that group is headed up by Frank Stuckenberg of York Township.
Anything else, Mr. Rhodes?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Appreciate it. Mr. Gearba, I'm sorry.
No,
You have something?
outside of this, I just
Yep,
suggest
I'll entertain
something
any
else.
other thoughts you may have at this time. Go ahead.
Because we keep running into problems with this projector, I'd like to recommend that we buy a small portable one or something out of our council budget. I don't know if it's $300 or $400, but something that we can have here that you can plug right into a laptop. It's either the small portable thing or whatever, but we keep having problems with this. I'd rather have something that we have as a backup at this point in time.
We actually have a brand-new one on its way. So it's going to be high definition, it's going to have all the bells and whistles, and
Is it going to work the same way with the screen?
the other thing that we're working on, of course, are the control, the connectivity here as well. So it should be resolved once we get that.
Yeah, just occasionally that, sometimes
Yes.
we wanted to use something like that outside of even this one. And so the idea would be just get an inexpensive one that we have that's available for council and for staff use here in the city.
Sure. And we actually do have one that we can borrow from the police department.
Got it.
Anything further? Mr. Roth?
I received a phone call and indications from my neighborhood that there was excessive noise over this past weekend, lots of gunfire. And it seems to come from not a city resident, but it's a resident of the of the township, Saline Township, that borders the city. And I was wondering if there's anything that the city can do about far as causing that to stop or making it safety or something like that, because it was very, very excessive, rapid shooting with multiple automatic guns going off. It lasted probably 2 hours, 2 hours and a half this past weekend. And it occurs before that, so I just wondered if there's something, since it's our neighbors that's doing it to the city, what we can do.
The comment was made that they thought automatic
Oh,
weapons
there
were-
are definitely automatic weapons being shot, because it's just such rapid fire, no one can keep account of it.
Well, that, if in fact there were automatic weapons being used, that's highly problematic. But Mr. Campbell, do you want to comment at all? Because this has been an item that we've heard on and off for some period of time.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's not in our jurisdiction. I mean, we can certainly, we could talk to the state and the county. Chief, I guess I'm looking at you. I mean, we can certainly make an attempt, but again, because you can fire firearms in the township, you know, that certainly is legal. And Chief, I don't know if you have any additional comments.
Well, I received a call earlier today on that as well, and I referred the person to, he actually was going to call the state police, which I said would be okay. I said, except actually the raid that occurred there several months ago was actually the DEA. So I referred that person to the DEA. So I don't know what the process is as far as where the system this is since the raid. We don't know that. They have not shared that information with us. It's very difficult when they don't share information.
Are there sunrise, sunset rules regarding the firing of a gun?
Well, for hunting, there's certainly there's certain hours. I don't know, because we don't have it in the city. We don't allow it at all in the city, of course. But we can check.
I mean, I didn't know what the ordinances are in Saline
Yeah,
Township in terms
right,
of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Chief, could we make contact with Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department and Michigan State Police so that we can make sure that we disseminate information to our neighbors and friends in the outlining townships who may have questions and concerns about an episode that may have occurred this weekend in one geographic location or at any time in any area? And also, if people suspect that an individual is using an automatic weapon, they need to, if I'm not mistaken, they need to immediately call 911. Am I correct?
There have been some changes in the laws as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed, and I will check and I will have that information for you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Rhodes?
I would just like to comment that based on the firing that I heard, which wasn't 100% of it, I would say it was a semi-automatic weapon that I was listening to.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. All right. Anything further? No, then we'll move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Good evening. It's good to be here. You guys are doing a lot of great, exciting things. I'm Gretchen Driscoll. I live at 320 North Ann Arbor Street here in Saline. I'm also your state representative. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you guys in a while, so it's nice to be back in the district on evenings that it's pretty spread out. A couple of things I just want to talk about, because I know you're really frustrated. Just so you know, I'm joining your frustration. To your point about 4052, it was not all of the legislature, it's the majority of the legislature. Actually, the minority of the House, there's a lot of really impassioned floor speeches related to local control. Actually, I think a lot of us feel that the local elected officials really know their communities best and should have the tools and the ability to make the decisions for their citizens. So it's a very interesting dynamic that's going on in Lansing where we talk about local control, but we don't really support it. And as a matter of fact, we require a lot of regulations. The legislature's put down a lot of regulations without providing the funding for that, which is really an unfunded mandate and I think is illegal. But we continue to struggle along with that. So I really came mostly to talk about transportation funding because I know that's a big issue for all of you. And as you know, when I was on your side, I really tried to do some work, and I asked to be on Transportation Committee last term. You saw what happened last term. So I asked not to be on this term because it's clear that this is a majority-led initiative. And we were supposed to have session tomorrow to vote on a transportation package, and it's been postponed yet again. So I would just say, from my perspective, watching from not being on the committee, but having been on the committee in the past, there's two clear sets of packages or bills in the Senate and in the House, neither of which I mean, there's parts to each one that I think are really important. And what I would just say is one of the challenges that we're having right now is there is an effort, an interest in taking money out of the general fund and for future budgets that would actually basically tie the hands of the legislators in the future. I would not vote for that. I've sat in public office for long enough to know that it's really an unreasonable request, or it's unreasonable to have a law that would actually take the ability of future legislators to do things and restrict their ability when we have other mechanisms out there that we're just not addressing. So I would just say we're working on it. Actually, I'm not working on it. There's the majority's working on it, and I don't think they're having agreement. They have two very different sets of packages. I work a lot with the folks that have been in transportation for a long time. I was actually today up at the Connected, the M-City. I don't know if any of you are following that, but there's a really great initiative in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan where we are really at the leading edge on some great technology that would be fantastic to implement in the state of Michigan, but we don't have laws right now to do that, like enforcing HOV lanes, which is part of my district is 23, and as you know, that's bumper-to-bumper traffic every day during rush hour. So, you know, I continue to work on behalf of the city of Saline and the rest of the constituents in the 52nd district, and I just share your frustration. Just know that I'm available anytime, 24/7. My cell is 734-255-2707, and if you have any questions, anybody have any questions right now? I know I ran over my time and it's been a long night. So just know we're working on your behalf, so thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? No, then I would note that our next meetings are on August 10th, which is not the first August, or first Monday in August, excuse me, with a work meeting beginning at 7:30 p.m. to discuss the purchasing of MERS time and certificate of occupancy. And then we have a regular meeting at 7:30, and we'll have our next regular meeting the following week, August 17th. No work meeting, just a regular meeting beginning at 7:30. We have no absences this evening, so at this time the chair would seek a motion to adjourn at 8:55 p.m.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Mr. Fordyce? Jeff, do you have a second?
Yeah.